The UK Parliament is gearing up for a week of crucial Brexit votes, starting with a decision on the deal Prime Minister Theresa May hammered out with the EU. In anticipation of Tuesday's vote, May headed to France to speak with European Commission officials. She's hoping the EU will give her the assurances she needs for Parliament to back her deal. If the UK leaves the EU without an agreement on major trade issues, analysts worry the fallout could impact markets around the world. Laura Kuenssberg, with our partners at the BBC, reports.
Divine guidance may be what's required. The Prime Minister went to Westminster Abbey today to celebrate the Commonwealth. Choreographed formalities here, very different to the sprawling Brexit saga.
As it is, God arranged the members in the body.
But the old truths maybe don't apply. At almost exactly the same time, across the road, the leader of the opposition was trying to work out what on earth is really going on.
It seems that the WhatsApp group or a lottery or something has chosen the member for Worcester to reply to the House, when my question was to the Prime Minister.
The meaningful vote will take place tomorrow, and the motion will be tabled today ahead of that debate. It is then this House will face a fundamental choice: back the Brexit deal or risk a delay that would mean months more arguing about Brexit, prolonging the current uncertainty which would do nothing but pass control to Brussels and increase the risks.
In other words, government ministers had to promise they'll stick to the promise they've already made. MPs will be allowed tomorrow to vote on the government's Brexit compromise.
After 3 months, the Prime Minister has not achieved one single change to her deal. She's simply, as we've often said, running down the clock between no deal, her deal, or the chaos of leaving the EU without any agreement with anyone.
Got a deal that's going to pass.
The mood in number 10 earlier was written all over the Chief Whip's face.
The Prime Minister's lost control of the Brexit process.
Talks with Brussels going nowhere, the prospect of another defeat looming. But after hours of goings and comings, eventually, by the back door, the Prime Minister emerged again, leaving this time for Strasbourg. She must have something on her mind. Since MPs booted out her Brexit deal in January, the Prime Minister's been continually trying to persuade the EU to make changes to its most controversial part. That's the so-called backstop, the guarantee against physical checks on the Irish border, no matter what happens. Number 10 says there's no concrete deal that's been done, but she wouldn't be on a plane to Strasbourg right now if she didn't believe there was something in the offing. Something that might get many of the MPs who voted against her on board for a crucial vote tomorrow.
At the moment, clearly they think they're coming back with something, which is why the delay is on. We'll have to wait and see. It's all a bit of a rush because we've got a vote tomorrow, so we're going to have to do some investigating in the meantime.
If Number 10 can't get a concession, MPs might vote to delay Brexit altogether, which would provoke its own uproar around here. Deal or no deal, as one cabinet minister said, every route has great peril. Laura Kuenssberg, BBC News, Westminster.
For more on this, let's bring in Quartz reporter Natasha Frost. Natasha, thanks for joining us. What are the biggest points of contention with Theresa May's deal?
Well, I think it's tricky because on the one hand, you have some people who want a really hard Brexit. They want to cut all ties, they want out, and they don't want really any of the meaningful structures which the deal to a certain extent preserves to be continued. Then there are people who will vote against the deal because they want a second vote. They think that it will be fairer to their constituents to go to another referendum. And then there are people who will vote against there are people who will vote against Theresa May's deal simply because of party politics, because they don't like May, because they think that she's handled it badly. So even though some of the changes she's made or says that she's made may alleviate some of the concerns that people have around the backstop, it's still pretty unlikely that the vote will pass.
Well, why is Northern Ireland so important for Brexit?
It's extremely complicated, but essentially the Good Friday Agreement, which was put in place towards the end of the Troubles, it could only be put in place because there was an assumption that the EU would continue to exist, that it would be possible to have a frictionless border between Ireland and Northern Ireland, and therefore that trade could pass between it over the border, that people could pass over the border. And what the backstop does is it keeps Northern Ireland in the customs union, which in a sense sets Northern Ireland apart from the rest of the UK, which is a big problem for British people in Northern Ireland. It's a big problem for Brexiteers who really want to cut those ties. And so there isn't really a good solution. And so what the backstop does is it basically buys more time. And previously the deal had Northern Ireland under a backstop agreement indefinitely, whereas now it's through to 2022, I think. And if the UK feels that the EU is making it difficult for them to end the backstop, they can legally air their grievances. So May's hoping that by kind of going for backstop light, people will buy this as a better solution than no deal, which is what she's selling as the alternative at this stage.
Well, what might the fallout be if the UK left the European Union without an actual deal?
It's quite scary to think about. I mean, at the moment, there are very few processes in place for things as vital as medication, let alone trade. At the moment, a no-deal situation looks like Britain coming crashing out of the EU. It would be a disaster for the economy. It would be a disaster for normal people trying to live their lives. It would be a disaster for commerce. It would be really very scary.
Well, what would need to happen for Brexit to be delayed? Would there be any benefit to that?
It's tricky to say because the EU has made it really abundantly clear that this is as good as it's going to get, that the changes that were made today are the only changes that were going to be made, and that whatever May pushes for, she's not going to get it. So if it were to be delayed, if the British Parliament votes against the deal and then votes in favour of delaying it, extending Article 50, I think the only thing that could happen other than Parliament deciding to vote on the deal or Parliament deciding that they think a no deal is possible would be a second referendum. And I think that that would be quite a dangerous thing because there are definitely people, although now Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party are saying that they would back a people's vote or a second referendum, there are definitely those who would feel that it was a huge failure of democracy and that what people voted for was not being served.
All right, Natasha Frost. Natasha, thank you very much.
Thank you.